Fairly stacked in here today. We had a judiciary non-civil hearing, as many of you may have heard, on hate crimes. That was hearing only, so we sort of adjourned that. We're now on to science and technology. We do have a hard stop at 4 for governmental affairs, but I think we've got time to address this important issue. Appreciate the presenter today. I'll let him introduce himself and kind of talk a little bit more about his subject matter. The idea of blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies is something that people hear a lot about in the popular media, but the details of what it is, the value added, and how it works as a medium of exchange, store of value, and actually, most recently, a creator of value as a financial instrument is relatively new in our, really in American culture. I will tell you there's some states that are looking to regulate cryptocurrencies. There's no sense of that here. But I think thing one, we need to understand that which it is we're talking about as a committee. So I think there's no intention on legislative action, but simply an understanding of what the technology is and what its potential impact is for Georgia. So again, if you could introduce yourself, welcome to the House Committee on Science and Technology.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for the other committee members that are allowing me to present here today. My name is Jeremy Beaudry, and I'm speaking on behalf of BitPay. I'm their legal counsel and also part of their compliance group and regulatory affairs. I'm going to try to present this video, see if it works, and if it does not, I'm just going to give you a brief overview. And I don't think the sound is working. Oh, okay.
There we go.
Our mission for BitPay is to help businesses and consumers really adopt the next generation of payments for the internet.
BitPay is bringing the future of payments to the world.
BitPay solves a lot of problems from across the whole payments ecosystem today. You know, we live in a world, especially in the West, that's dominated by credit card payments.
Every traditional payment that you're using, whether it's a credit card or a bank product, it was designed well before the internet. And it was never really designed to be used in that environment.
With a Bitcoin transaction on BitPay's platform, we can completely eliminate the fraud issues that you see with credit cards.
You receive the funds to your bank account, the payment happens over Bitcoin rails, and so it's cheap and fast for you and for the sender.
But it opens you up to receiving a new form of payment from a shopper.
The payment is as fast as an email, and our settlement to the business receiving payment happens the very next day. Our customers can request a payment in dollar or euro terms or a number of other currencies, and they will get paid out and settled in those currencies. And then BitPay manages accepting Bitcoin as payment and then converting that into the local currency.
From a consumer standpoint, Bitcoin enables people all around the world, the unbanked, the underbanked, to purchase goods and services through our platform and our merchant platform.
Services like what BitPay provides does is it lets you own your money. It lets you be in control.
With a BitPay wallet, you can connect it to your exchange account, and without even leaving the app, you can buy Bitcoin and have it transferred into your wallet. Once it's in your wallet, you can use that to make payments to friends or family. And if those friends or family happen to be located in another country, they can receive those Bitcoin, and then if they have our debit card, they can convert that Bitcoin into their local currency and spend it.
For the first time in history, you have a payment system that has no counterparty risk.
We are building the world's most powerful technology platform for digital assets and payments.
We're changing the way the world does payments and businesses interact with each other.
What we do here is we build the future.
So now I'm speaking on behalf of BitPay. Again, thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. I'm speaking on behalf of BitPay as a company, as a Georgia company, and also Bitcoin and virtual currency. And so there's going to be a couple points I'm going to be addressing is virtual currency landscape, a little bit more about BitPay, trends in virtual currency payments, regulatory updates, and trends in fraud and illicit activity. So in terms of the virtual currency landscape, there was a pretty good slide that would show you what sort of companies and organizations are facilitated for virtual currency. And it goes into mining, and that's the people that, or the organizations actually secure the blockchains. Then there are the exchanges themselves, which traditionally, if you've been involved in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, Coinbase is the largest one in the United States. And then there's merchants that accept Bitcoin, such as Microsoft, Gift, Newegg, Expedia.com, Dell, Overstock are also some merchants that accept Bitcoin. And then there are wallets that provide the ability to interact with the Bitcoin blockchain, allowing you to send a payment through your phone or some type of digital device to a merchant. And BitPay is in the merchant servicing side of things and also on the wallet side. And I'll describe a little bit more about that because after being here for less than 3 hours, there's a lot of misconception about BitPay's role in the Bitcoin blockchain and also other interactions that we do. So about BitPay. So we started in 2011. We are a Georgia company. We had 2 Georgia Tech graduates that founded the company and have made it as big as it is today. We currently have 52 employees, and we've raised about $62 million in venture financing. We just closed our second Series B round for $30 million. And some of our notable investors are Sir Richard Branson. I also got to meet Ashton Kutcher, so that was really cool to see a hero of mine from that 70s show. But we also have Index Ventures with Peter Thiel and some other, our newest one, which is Aquiline Investments. And they traditionally deal with companies that are getting larger and they're wanting to scale appropriately. And we have offices in Atlanta. We originally founded at Atlanta Tech Village. We then graduated to the building right over to the side of Atlanta Tech Village, and then recently moved to the Avalon in October. And from that, we chose about a quarter of the space, and since October, we've doubled in size again, so we're having to take another quarter of the space, so now we have half a floor, and we're in the Microsoft building if you've ever seen it. Oh, no problem, no problem. Thank you very much for having great restaurants. So on the acceptance side of things is we allow merchants, this is a little bit more about BitPay. So BitPay allows merchants such as a restaurant or a Microsoft to accept Bitcoin and not actually deal with the underlying protocol. We allow to settle to them in US dollars, as euros, and some of our other settlement currencies. So that allows them to open up a new channel without having to experience the perceived risk and the value of Bitcoin. When someone wants to purchase something that's going to be $1,000, we charge 1% versus a typical credit card company will charge 2.5% to 3%. So merchants like that. And then on the other side of it, as mentioned in the video, is we also do the Bitcoin blockchain and other push network type transactions. There is no chargeback risk. So once you send out a transaction, a Best Buy will not have a chargeback risk. And that allows merchants to receive their money, know that the funds are good, and then there's that contractual level if there's a disagreement between the shopper and the merchant. But there is never that type of fraud risk that's associated with a lot of credit card and debit card transactions. Then we also have our second product, which is disbursements. One of our companies, Microsoft, might have developers all around the world that might not have certain citizens in that country that have developed banking systems, such as Nigeria. Whenever Microsoft would like to pay some folks around the world and don't want to go through the ACH rails or also wire transfers, which typically take a long time and very expensive, we're able to facilitate that type of transaction almost as quickly as an email. So that's a secondary product that we've been launching across the United States for companies that want to use that type of technology. Then we also have our wallet app that allows you to interact with the Bitcoin blockchain. And then we also have our BitPay prepaid debit card, which allows people that hold Bitcoin to instantly load the prepaid card. And if they don't accept Bitcoin natively at the restaurant or at the online store, you're able to use that debit card to purchase whatever your goods. And so the other trusted companies that deal with BitPay is Visa, Microsoft, Intel, Newegg, Virgin Atlantic, which, so if you're ever able to afford a flight up to space and want to pay in Bitcoin, we facilitate that transaction. So that's a really great experience if you have that much Bitcoin. And we also have Shopify, Namecheap, AppMex, which allows you to buy hard assets like gold, and Steam, which is if maybe some people are still playing video games on Steam, they use us as a payment processor for Bitcoin. And the trends in the virtual currency payment landscape. Over the past couple of years, there's been a huge jump in the amount of transactions that have happened. Some of it's been speculative, but then a lot of it has been people that have actually started to use the Bitcoin blockchain for payments. And this has caused an insane amount of growth, and with a technology still at its infancy, it caused a lot of network congestion, which increased the fees and made things a little bit harder to transact with the Bitcoin blockchain. And that's created alternative currencies such as Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, and several others. And across where we're seeing most of the transactions is in North America, Europe, which dominates about 80% of the Bitcoin network, and then 10% in Asia, 3% in South America, and 2% in Australia, and 3% in Africa. And as I mentioned, is that because of the transactions have increased steadily, there also has been the fee issues. So originally when Bitcoin, there's some great documentaries on Netflix, and actually BitPay is mentioned several times in both of those documentaries. Fees were a fraction of a penny. It didn't matter if you were sending $1 or $10 million, it was still a fraction of a penny to send it. Now, the Bitcoin, because the network congestion has increased the fees dramatically, and as I mentioned, it's created a new landscape for alternative currencies. What I would also like to mention is that within the transaction network, there's been a lot of regulatory updates. A lot of folks in the state and also on the federal side have come in to inquire about Bitcoin and also BitPay. So I'd like to mention is that if anybody had enough time to watch TV last week, if y'all were not as busy, the SEC and the CFTC offered an update on how they view virtual currency. And they are taking the approach of do no harm. So as in every new technology, there's always going to be people that try to use the technology for bad, illicit purpose. And ultimately, they are going to prosecute those folks. So there's going to be, just when the internet was coming alive and well, there were scam sites saying that they were offering certain services or promising fortunes, and those were Ponzi schemes or whatever. And then that's the same issue, and they're going to regulate that and also prosecute. And then more recently, though, Arizona has sponsored a bill, and the Senate is now wanting to accept Bitcoin as a form of payment to pay for taxes and penalties. So that's something that's really interesting to make the state a little bit more 21st century, allowing a new payment rail to pay for taxes. And then in Tennessee, our neighbors from the north, they're also looking at smart contracts and being able for the state government to enforce those smart contracts. So that's also a really interesting area. Japan officially classified Bitcoin as a means of payment. And now that we're in the Olympic season, South Korea is one of the leaders in virtual currency, especially Bitcoin. And so we're seeing a lot of transaction growth happen there. Australia has removed the double taxation of virtual currency. We'll see if the U.S. Treasury ever moves on that. That'd be pretty nice. And then China is beginning to ban ICOs, which are initial coin offerings. The reason why I think that they're doing that is they want to make sure that the new currencies go through a regular regulatory regime that they're used to. The SEC has also commented on that and making sure that things are processed correctly. If you're offering some type of security, you do have to go through the SEC. And then trends in fraud. One thing that I would like a lot of people or I don't think a lot of people realize is that Bitcoin is not used for illicit purpose. Or traditionally, 99% of all payments on the Bitcoin network are not used for illicit purpose. Since 2009 to 2010, maybe, there was a lot of issues with the Silk Road, and then eventually Alphabet was the other large site that was used Bitcoin, and then eventually, more companies got into the world of cryptocurrency, and BitPay is considered what law enforcement calls an off-ramp company, which associates a Bitcoin user to personal information whenever they're purchasing something. There's going to be an associated address or name. And then, yes.
Jeremy, if you could, thank you
Yeah.
for perhaps overestimating the knowledge of this committee on some things, and I can't speak for everybody.
Yeah, no problem.
But I do want to maybe pause there for a minute.
Sure.
I do think there are going to be some questions.
Wonderful. I'm prepared.
I think there's some very fundamental questions. I'm sure the Senate and their elevated wisdom we're right there with you. But my board is lighting up with questions.
Wonderful.
I think there's going to be some questions about a virtual currency. What creates it and makes it a thing?
Okay.
What's its legal status relative to legal tender, taxation, SEC regulation? What are the elements maybe of a virtual currency that makes it legit versus just some kids that are tinkering with digits? But that's just a possibility what you may hear. I would like to recognize our vice chair first, Representative Rakestraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I've written down some questions. What is a Bitcoin rail?
So in the payment world, I started adopting that after going to Money 2020. It's a big payment system meetup in Vegas, and I mean, it's amazing. I'd highly recommend it in October. But a payment rail is just like Visa. So if you're charging a transaction, you're using the Visa rail. If you're using American Express, it's the American Express rail. So it's
so
the
is
way
it
that
the
payments
technology that's carrying?
Imagine it's just like a railroad. You're using the American Express train to get your transaction from point A to point B versus Visa or MasterCard. And in our world now, it's the Bitcoin rail, is that you're using the Bitcoin network to facilitate a payment, transactions.
Okay, so you were talking about mining and blockchains.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me?
Okay, so I'm not going to try to give you something overly complicated. The mining aspect of Bitcoin is what secures the Bitcoin blockchain. As more and more miners and more people utilize the Bitcoin blockchain, the algorithm that actually creates the blockchain and creates or makes the transaction secure increases in difficulty.
Jeremy,
Yes.
could you explain blockchain?
Sure.
I think there's a couple in our committee who get that, but just what the intellectual property of that is, what the value added of that is, and how sort of mechanically it works as the building block of all this.
Yeah, like I'm familiar with data mining, but I don't know what mining is in the currency world.
No problems. So in the Bitcoin mining world, okay, is what creates a blockchain is a history of data. It's a public ledger that anybody that has access can utilize it. It's not, a lot of people think that Bitcoin is fully anonymous. It is not. It's pseudo-anonymous. So there is the possibility of having certain information that is detectable to provide a transaction to an individual, and that's the reason why the criminals get arrested and they go to jail. So that's just kind of a side note there. But what creates a blockchain is a block of transactions that are recorded on a public ledger, and are shown to link the creation of the Bitcoin to the ownership of the Bitcoin. What the general ledger says is that it might state that you have 3 Bitcoin, and 10,000s of computers are also saying in agreement you have 3 Bitcoin. And so let's just say you were trying to spend your 3 Bitcoin twice. Well, once your transaction is sent to the Bitcoin blockchain, it would say, no, you don't have six Bitcoin, you only have 3, therefore we're going to say no to your secondary transaction, but yay on your first one. And then once those miners, whoever wins, honestly, just imagine someone picking for gold, and that winner gets Bitcoin. And
so is it like a bank account? Blockchain is like a bank account and a transaction history that is
Well, just imagine your business or your bank account being fully public, but it's only written, your name isn't there. It's just a cryptographic signature. So just a bunch of numbers and letters. And it's all public. So everything is on there, all your transactions, how you received your Bitcoin, how it's spent, that's all tracked.
So again, I think to put it simply, so for every Bitcoin, its current owner and every previous owner and all the transaction history of everything that's ever happened from the very beginning of its Bitcoin time follows it wherever it goes, so you can always trace back where it came from.
Exactly.
You've got traceability through the process.
From the beginning of time. Oh, that's a little scary. So, I mean, I can't imagine following a dollar like that. So what secures it, and how are you preventing fraud?
So again, BitPay is a merchant processor, so we don't go into more of the secure side of it. That's what the miners do. So with mathematics, and I can't really tell you all about the technicalities of it because I'm a lawyer. I'm not a computer scientist, such as the people that also work at my company. But ultimately, it's cryptographic security, which uses the public and private keys which secure the actual transaction. Natively on your device, if you have like a BitPay wallet, you have a private key that's associated with your phone. There's no other private key that's going to have it other than your device. And then there's a thing called a public key, which is announced on the Bitcoin blockchain. All of the addresses are public, but those public keys can be identified with that private key. So imagine if you had a secure password that only you knew to get in a certain part of your house, right? But your overall home might have one where your kids can utilize it. So they can get into the home, but maybe not into your vault, you know? So that's the way that a public and a private key is fairly similar in the Bitcoin and virtual currency.
Okay, so if it's securing it back to the phone, if you lose your phone or somebody steals your phone, they have access to your, in
some ways, depending on whether or not you have a custodial wallet or not. So Coinbase, for instance, is a lot like a bank account. They insure your funds, so in the chance that there's a hack at Coinbase and people steal your Bitcoin, that's insured. Within our app, we've decided to do a non-custodial app where you are securing your Bitcoins natively on your phone. So a lot of the times you're using your iPhone as your thumbprint. So if you were to lose your phone, you have a thing called a 12-word passphrase, which you're able to, if you lost your device, dropped it, and it went down the ocean, you can retrieve your Bitcoin by using a 12-word passphrase. And that 12-word passphrase, in terms of if you ever really want to nerd it out and read the white paper, it makes it more secure and has a bigger improbability of solve rate than solving the hardest code ever created that can actually be broken. So it's pretty amazing.
So is that the security piece? How you're
that's
fraud?
just on our platform. But in terms of the miners are the ones that are actually doing the prevention of double spending. And what double spending means is, in my scenario that said that you can spend 3 Bitcoin and 3 Bitcoin, the miners are going to say you can spend 3 Bitcoin because you only have 3, but your secondary transaction is going to say, nope, you're not going to be able to use that. I don't want to, the reason why I don't want to go so much into the technical side of it is because it is pretty difficult to understand.
Chair recognizes Representative Thomas for a question.
Thank you so much for breaking it all the way down for us. I have like 12 questions, but I'm only going to ask one.
Okay.
Mr. Chair. So I've been reading about this for a while, and it's really kind of blowing my mind. I know back in 2009, and when Bitcoin first came out, I wish that somebody whispered in my ear so I would have bought some.
Yep.
But anyway, long story short, can you kind of break it down just a little bit for me, kind of in layman's terms? Like, so how do you start your own currency and get around the laws of SEC, all those different? How do you do that and do it in a structure to where people can trust you with their money?
Well, one thing is that there is some type of misconception on whether or not it is a currency versus an actual store of value. Really, because of the scarcity of Bitcoin, that's what makes it in some way valuable. There's only going to be 21 million ever released in production. That's a mathematical code. You can't change it. 21 million is going to be made, and that's it. Okay, so the scarcity of it makes it a value storage device if adoption rises. And I think that we've seen that over since 2009, whether or not there is adoption. Just like other technologies that some can be introduced and can be backed, a lot of the times is these ICOs, and what you're maybe hinting at is creating a new currency. It needs to catch on. There needs to be the white paper, which is the kind of the research and business plan of the coin, needs to make sense. It needs to be backed by investors that want to do it. There's other cryptocurrencies, such as a larger one would be Ethereum or Ripple, that has a use case, and it's solving a pain point in maybe the banking system, whether it be international banking, or also in Ethereum's case, it's smart contracts, which Tennessee is wanting to enforce that. So if you just imagine having a record, a deed, using blockchain technology, which would allow you to have your deed securely on your phone, and you're the only one who's able to send the deed to someone else. And that's all done through encrypted data. And I'm not talking about this AOL type style encrypted data. I mean, it is data that is so secure that people are trusting billions of dollars and betting on this type of technology being safe and safeguarded, because it's all open source. So all these computer scientists are testing and vetting the type of technology. So if you wanted to create your own coin, it might not catch on. But it might if you have a really great research paper and you're solving a pain point for the fintech community.
I just want to follow up once on that. So you said before that, the investors invested 62 million?
Well, that's within BitPay. So we're the merchant processor. We don't mine Bitcoin. We are not the creators of Bitcoin. That was someone, we actually don't know who created the white paper. The pseudonym is Satoshi Nakamoto. There are theories, but that's neither here or there. BitPay is the facilitator of merchant processing. So we're able to, someone wants to pay in Bitcoin to buy a computer, Newegg gets settled in US dollar. That's the way that we view it, and they aren't. No merchant is ever susceptible to any of the price decreases or increases. If they're listing it for $1,000, that's what they're going to get paid.
So the last follow-up to that is that since it is at 21 million, that's the cap, and I'm pretty sure that's the sell point because it's scarcity.
Yep.
Do you think that the cap will ever go up? Do you think they'll eventually?
No, I mean, it's mathematically impossible.
Okay.
Like, that's the difference between, when you look at the US dollar, there's mines that meet and they're able to say, well, we need to raise the debt ceiling. That's impossible for the Bitcoin blockchain. It's 1 + 1 = 2 unless mathematics changes and changes those two numbers. It's just the way that it's going to be. They said 21 million is going to be the cap, and it's the cap.
Well, thank you for that. Even though I will add that it looks like Bitcoin is changing mathematics as we see it.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Spencer. Question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you buy part of a Bitcoin?
Yes. There are fractional ownerships of Bitcoin. You could purchase $1, or you can purchase $1 million, or $10, $100. Doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to explore the cap issue that was brought up. Mm-hmm. So what distinguishes this currency, if we're calling it a currency, from that of which is a currency backed by the faith and credit of some government? Mm-hmm. So what distinguishes this from that. At one point, the U.S. currency was actually weighted or connected to a gold standard.
Mm-hmm.
That's been done away with. And then really what's sort of holding the U.S. dollar in its current position is the world reserve currency status.
Mm-hmm.
And so what makes you different in terms, you being Bitcoin, in terms of trust, security, faith? Because I personally don't have a lot of faith and credit in the U.S. monetary policy at this point.
Well, ultimately, it's a peer-to-peer type payment system is always about who's involved in the peer-to-peer. As more people interact with the Bitcoin blockchain, it solidifies its use and also its technology. So ultimately, if you're willing to spend $9,000 expecting that over the next 10 years, more people are going to enter into that payment system, that the value will likely grow up or increase. And so whenever you are looking at Bitcoin versus the US dollar, I'm reminded of when I watched the movie The Founder, and you could purchase a McDonald's meal for $0.25, and now it costs about $8. So there is some price there too. But what I'm more concerned about is how BitPay is interacting with the Bitcoin blockchain and other cryptocurrencies. Is that BitPay is a regulated entity. We're regulated by FinCEN and also state departments of financial services, whether or not we have a money transmitter license. So I think that by Bitcoin being regulated on a state level, with companies adopting it, it's proving its use. It's proving the use case behind it. And that's what also solidifies its existence, is that more people understand the pain points of it and what it's trying to solve. When you're trying to send, if you're even a large business sending $1 million outside of Nigeria to Switzerland, which is one of our companies uses us for, is to take the Nigerian lira that is almost impossible to get out of the country because no one else wants to purchase it. By using Bitcoin, they're able to send it over to Switzerland, and that company is then able to send goods back to Nigeria. That's a pain point within the current international banking community.
Okay, I got one more question. Now, you mentioned about Virgin Galactic. I'm kind of interested because I'm a space guy myself. But what is Richard Branson? What is he doing with Bitcoin in his operation? Can you say anything?
Yeah,
about
I mean, in some ways, Richard Branson is a Bitcoin believer. I think that he's a believer in emerging technologies and understands that new payment systems need to be created because there are some issues that present itself in third world countries, and also within the own domestic system is the underbanked and cannot open up a account at a local bank because they might not have credit or something like that. Within the Bitcoin ecosphere, there's no prevention of people joining the Bitcoin network because it's just like being able to access the internet. So using Virgin, they were one of the first ones to accept Bitcoin as a form of payment to use in their spaceship, and even on their flight side of things also went live, which was kind of cool.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chair recognizes number 12. Chairman Martin.
Thank you. This is it's great and an interesting topic.
Yeah.
I can't help but, wonder, what happens with all this stuff if electronics, fail us one day. I mean, as we move to this. But serious question.
Yep.
You can buy an airplane ticket on Virgin Atlantic because, he believes in it. He's an investor or early adapter with Bitcoin. So, somewhere in the last 60 days, a Bitcoin costs you $20,000 US. Now, this afternoon, if I just looked at Coinbase, it's about 8,000.
Yep.
So if I just hypothetically, if I had booked a $800 flight on Virgin Atlantic, 60 days ago and paid for it with Bitcoin, I would have paid. I mean, they price it in U.S. dollars and then translate that to Bitcoin.
Yes.
Correct? So it's a conversion mechanism, but you use the conversion at the point you make the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I would have gotten a deal, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, there's been recent press releases of folks purchasing Lamborghinis, Ferraris with Bitcoin that they mined back in the day, and so they purchase a $500,000 car with $3. Realistically, I mean that's pretty amazing. Or mansions, but then there's also other folks that have gone on the other side of things, is providing financial relief to nonprofits. Is a we don't know, but it's a organization called Pineapple Fund that has contributed $80 million to donations through nonprofits and charities. And so, I mean, there's also a really great side of Bitcoin that's been highlighted in the past year or two.
And
Yep.
I don't mean to, I wasn't going down that.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
But I wasn't headed that direction. It's not an indictment.
Okay.
It's just serious, again, trying to get just this hands on your nebulous thing.
Yep.
Because this would be a lot like in an older day, an older historic day of you deciding, the king put out 20 rocks, and he said each one of these rocks is worth something, and I'm never going to sign another rock. That's essentially what you've got, except it's a virtual thing.
Yep.
But my question is, I have never seen anything priced in Bitcoin.
Yes, so I think that
it's always in somebody's currency converting to Bitcoin or converting to another cryptocurrency.
Yes.
And so that's what I wonder about. So help me out with that. And the second one, and then I'll yield, is the second question is, talk about the taxability of that. Sure. Because had I been an investor, and I would, I'm not a great investor, but had I been able to find a way to short Bitcoin at 20,000, I think I would have done that. Mm-hmm. But if I had done that, would that have been a gain?
Okay.
At what level is that a gain? Because if I go over Europe last summer and I brought some euros back, I've actually made a few percentage points because the dollar's gained against the euro since then.
Exactly.
So talk to me about that. If I had put U.S. dollars, or if
Yeah.
I put U.S. dollars in a Bitcoin now at 8,000, and then I buy something for it and it's worth 20,000, is there a tax hit to me for that?
The IRS has already provided guidance on that, in that Bitcoin is viewed as real property. So so those laws go along with the IRS guidelines. So if you were to purchase, let's just say at $10,000, and then it increased in value to $20,000, that purchase would inherit a $10,000 appreciation, and there would be a taxable consequence or issue right when that transaction is created. There is a push on the federal government to write new laws regulating some form of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, is that there's a certain dollar value that's assessed. If it's under $600, there wouldn't be a taxable event, but that's still something that's on just being discussed.
Mr. Chairman, may I follow up, direct follow up to that? So what I guess I'm getting at, again, these are all hypotheticals, but let's assume Bitcoin will double, in the next segment. So I bought a Bitcoin today for $8,000. That's how one does that. I think I'm using the right terminology. So I own this thing, this virtual thing, and I see you laughing. It is. I mean, I don't know. We refer to it as a thing, and yet it does not exist.
Well, in some ways it does. It's
you can't hold one in your hand.
Well,
That's just what I mean.
Yeah.
Is you have it. I believe in it if people do it. But okay, so I'm getting off on tangents. So 8,000. Then in July of next year, I trade it in or I use it to purchase, some land out in the country that I'm gonna build a house on, and it happens to be worth 16. Okay. I guess what I'm looking for is the IRS guidance. If I can do a like exchange, if I'm doing property to property, but this you actually have to convert, even though somebody would take a Bitcoin perhaps, because it's a dollar priced another piece of real property that's dollar price or another asset real price, you actually do the conversion back and forth, so it creates a taxable event every time you spend.
Yes.
Okay.
Every single
that's what I
time.
was trying
Every
to
single
get
time
at.
you push a transaction to another person that is not yourself, there's a thing called sweeping, which allows you
Right.
to move your money with it. It's like taking money from your checking account to your savings account.
And you don't
That's
have to
not a
do
taxable
that.
transaction.
Right.
But when you're sending it to someone or a merchant, you're purchasing something or you're paying someone back, that's a taxable event.
Yeah, so you can't just move it around. You can't
No.
just spend dollars. Okay.
No,
that's-
the IRS and they also released guidance in December about like-kind exchanges between cryptocurrencies, and they said that's also a taxable event.
event.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair recognizes Vice Chairman Braddock. I'm sorry, Rakestraw. Forgive me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so is this now being used to pay for things like utilities, car payments, insurance, mortgages?
So it's definitely getting there. There are some of our merchants are allowing that. There is, and some other companies are also using it as a way to use it as like a bill payment method. So that company has money transmitter licenses in the state that they accept that type of service. And but yeah, that's actually happening. We have merchants, cars. People are purchasing cars with it, and I think we're very close to doing more and more of the utility side of things, buying normal things that might not be like a video game or a computer.
So, okay, so he was given instances where, you know, the value is going up and down. Is that based on the stock market or the stock price?
It's based
I'm
on the
unclear.
value. Yeah, it's based on the exchange rate that the actual exchange is willing to accept and also spend that Bitcoin.
Well, you've got the exchanges for different countries. That's one dynamic. And then
Yep.
you've got, you know, stock market or volatility of the value of it at any given point in time. So, I mean, that's such a complex algorithm to keep up with this thing, if we can call it a thing, this figment.
Yep.
And I don't know. It's just really
so I mean,
hard to grasp.
So the stock market, as you said, is that it's pretty hard to distinguish what the price of a stock is unless you have a willing buyer and seller. And that's the same thing that with Bitcoin, is that an exchange will look at their price book and they're saying, well, I have a list order of folks that want to buy Bitcoin at 10,000, but then there's sellers that are only going to sell it at 11,000, and then they match those people together. So that's the inherent price that people fixate to Bitcoin, and they associate a US dollar value to that because we live in the US. But I think
that's just here.
Well, yeah.
And this is international.
Yeah.
And so do you see this like moving us to like a one world type currency eventually as it's more heavily adopted?
I think that there's definitely use cases for that, or at least an alternative payment gateway that allows everybody to participate in it. And I think that to view it as a currency versus a technology, that's the reason why. And I mean, it's hard not to associate with a currency because it has a real dollar value, but ultimately allows people to transact and store value and send value to another person using the Bitcoin blockchain. And so, you know, for you, as it said in the video, if you're able to send someone $1,000 on the Bitcoin blockchain and you have family friends that live in France and you want to submit that, if you have to use a traditional payment method like a wire transfer, you go into your bank and you say, I want to submit $1,000. It might cost a lot of money on that. Well, in Bitcoin world, you just get their public address and you send them Bitcoin, and it's done that quickly in a flash. So the reason why I do ultimately think that there is a proper use case for it is more and more adoption. There's more and more transactions that are happening on the Bitcoin blockchain, and it's making a lot more sense for businesses to use it because we're solving real world problems. And the fact is that BitPay, being a Georgia company, we rely heavily on the legislature to make sure that there's proper guidance that's really paving the way, and we have a great Department of Financial Services here that's helped us out and guide us through some of the challenges that we have for money transmitter licenses and such.
Okay, so I had one more question, but I'm trying to wrap my head around the whole I mean, so it's almost like the dollar is kind of securing it because we're tying it back to the value of a dollar here, but somewhere else it may be the yen or the dinero securing it.
Well,
and then if that crashes.
No, so the U.S. dollar value, like, I mean, if for instance, the dollar were to crash, okay, or let's not be pessimistic on the U.S. dollar. Let's just say the yen will go down significantly.
Yeah, I like that better.
Okay, so so the price of Bitcoin to yen will significantly increase. Just that ratio. So I mean, the price of Bitcoin is increased in the U.S. dollar, yes. But as more and more adoption happens, and I mean, like, worldwide, we're still at infancy. Imagine the internet back in '92. You're now getting an email that says hi. That's where we're at right now. But if we're getting more and more mass adoption, you're going to see, because the price will end up stabilizing at a certain value, that's when you're going to start seeing prices being in Bitcoin versus whatever the native currency in that country is.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Houston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, sometimes I remember looking, I'm a software engineer, so I was aware of this back when it was $4 a coin. So I was just telling my wife, like, I should have stopped buying silver and gold. Can you still make your own computers to do the mining? Is that still available to the public to create their own not even a supercomputer, just a powerful computer and go out and mine?
Not so much Bitcoin, because it's pretty much saturated in terms of you have to have a warehouse the size of like an Amazon data warehouse to mine Bitcoin. Because it requires that much energy consumption, and you have to have some powerful processors, what they call ASIC processors, to process the actual code validation and the mining itself. So back in the day, you're able to use, this computer, for instance, to mine Bitcoin. But because there's a lot more transactions and a lot more miners out there, they have to kick up their game, and they want to get those Bitcoins. So that's why they're investing millions upon millions of dollars in data warehouses that mine that type of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the worst decisions I ever made, was not buy Bitcoin when it was $4 a coin.
Yeah.
I would remind you, there are people who are, and I hope I'm not stepping on toes here, they're kicking themselves. Why didn't I buy Netscape Navigator? That was so hot back in the day. But there's winners and losers. You never know.
Of course.
But I would ask you. We are out of time.
Yeah.
Could you conclude for us?
Yeah, sure.
Great presentation. What I'd like is I'd love your contact for people to be able to follow up.
No problem.
And are there any asks you all have relative to the legislature? Leave you alone?
Yeah.
Or are there things we need to think about as state policymakers?
Well, I do think that what Arizona has proposed to accept Bitcoin at state level is pretty good legislation. Is that it's allowing virtual currency payments to happen at a state level, and it gives it a lot more promise to the technology. But as BitPay is an Atlanta company and we're growing like crazy, I think that we just need to be partners, and we need to have that open discussion on what some of your pain points might be. If there needs to be more education, more research done, and more committee meetings, we're certainly open to doing that. But I really would like to thank you very much for allowing me to speak here today. It's been a wonderful experience, and I'm hoping that we can have future discussions like this.
So with that, thank you for your presentation today. Thanks for everyone that came, and we stand adjourned.